Hi guys, I'm VJ and welcome to the Season 6 Gragas Jungle Guide. So hopefully by the end of this guide you will understand the pretty much fundamentals of Gragas and actually be able to start playing him to actually take into your ranked champion pool, or if you already do know how to play him, hopefully it can give you a little bit of extra information just to solidify your knowledge on him. So anyway, without me rambling on continuously, on with the guide. Gragas is largely considered to be pretty much just a really big tank. He's a frontline champion that you usually play. You can play him full AP, although I really would not recommend this whatsoever. You either pretty much just go, as you will see in the build anyway, you just go Runic Echoes and then into your full tank build, or you can actually go Cinderhulk if you want to go like full super tank, because you do have a damage reduction as well, which we will come on to when we are on the ability section. But that's pretty much the general consensus with Gragas. You pretty much play damage a little bit early on and then you transition into a full tank. But as I said before, you can play full AP, but it's really not recommended. Gragas does actually play way more effectively when he is actually played as a tank, since you do have pretty high base damage and you also have pretty good ratios as well, and your cooldowns are relatively low, so you do get out quite a lot of damage when you are a tank. But if you are full AP, obviously you generally only really get one, maybe two if you're lucky, rotations of your spells off, even though they are quite low, but you can easily get blown up. Moving on to Gragas' abilities. So you'll also notice that his abilities are actually really simple, so I would actually highly recommend Gragas for generally not exactly first time jungling, when you are kind of sort of at a medium level of jungling, since he is a really nice jungler for you to pick up and he is really straightforward as well. Can get a little bit complicated with his ulti if you do mess it up, but it does not take long at all to actually understand and be able to get that down. So Gragas' passive is Happy Hour, so every time he uses an ability he gains 4% of his maximum health, so that has a static cooldown of 8 seconds, so basically as soon as you use an ability you gain some of your health back. So it's really nice for the regen in the jungle, and just generally when you're clearing about, when you're walking around, you can gain health by using your abilities. It's really nice when you have blue buff as well, since that's basically infinite mana. You can be walking from camp to camp and then just using abilities to gain your health up, so you're always really healthy in the jungle. Gragas' Q ability is Barrel Roll, so from the text and all the numbers you might think that this ability is actually really complicated and really weird, but it's actually a really simple ability. All Gragas does is throw a barrel onto the floor and it'll stay there for a couple of seconds. It's 4 seconds maximum, and then once you detonate it, it'll slow and deal some damage. The longer it's on the ground for is the increase in slow and also the increase in damage that it'll actually do. So a thing to remember with this ability is that it will stay on the ground for 4 seconds, but it will reach its maximum damage and maximum slow by 2 seconds, so you don't have to leave it on the ground for the full 4 seconds to get the maximum damage and slow. Gragas' W ability is Drunken Rage. So this is the ability that will actually, if you have played against Gragas anyway, you'll notice that he has some natural tankiness. Even if he doesn't actually have any like defensive items, he only has, say, Runic Echoes, you'll notice that he actually is kind of still difficult to kill, since he does actually have this damage reduction, which we are seeing on screen now. So this ability actually has a channel to it, so when you press W, all it means is you channel for 0.75 seconds, so that means you can't cast any abilities or auto attack during that time, but then once the cast is over you can basic attack, and it's basically an empowered auto, that's how you think of it, and it reduces damage and deals bonus magic damage on top of someone's maximum health as well, so you deal more damage to tanks basically. But you will see all the big text that Riot does give for the actual ability anyway. So for 2.5 seconds you actually receive damage reduction. So this is actually on top of your tankiness that you will get later on. This makes Gragas incredibly hard to kill. And remember too that this damage reduction also works against monsters, so that means you actually take less damage in the jungle than most champions. Gragas' E is Body Slam. This is probably what he's most famous for as a champion. This is kind of his signature move that he actually has. So Body Slam is basically Gragas charges forward, it will deal magic damage, and then when you collide with something it will knock them back and then stun them for 1 second. So this ability actually makes Gragas really strong in gank, since he does have a stun, and the actual hitbox for that actual ability is the same as Gragas' model, which is actually quite big as well, so it's pretty difficult to actually miss this stun. And it's also its own little mini dash in a way, but it's also an offensive ability as well. It's also a defensive ability too. You can actually peel with it really well, and you'll also notice that if you do hit something with Body Slam, it is actually reducing the cooldown for 3 seconds, so it's really nice if you can hit this, and it is really easy to hit as well, so you probably won't have any issues with that. And finally, Gragas' ultimate ability is Explosive Cask. So this is probably the only more complex part of Gragas' kit, since this actually can be messed up. So what you really need to be careful of when you are playing Gragas is it's sort of like the Lee Sin issue, where you can actually knock someone away and save them instead of killing them. So you need to be really careful with Gragas on that, and you also need to make sure that when you are placing it, so say you initiate a team fight with it, you need to be really careful not to knock, like, you know, the full AP Amumu into your team and then everyone dies. So it just take a little bit of time to get used to, but once you do get it, it's relatively simple anyway, since you can actually set up your Body Slam with the Explosive Cast. But it does take a little bit of practice, but it's not really too difficult, so I'm sure you'll be able to do it. But anyway, the ability itself is just an exploding cast. It is a displacement ability, so that means wherever you throw it, the explosion will knock them in the opposite direction. So if you throw the cask to the right of them, they will be exploded. The cask will explode and then they will fly over to the left side. So just think of it like that. It's general physics basically. But yeah, it's a very, very simple ability. Kind of a bit complex, but once you do get down to it, it is actually kind of simple. The leveling order for Gragas is actually really, really simple to remember. All you need to do is go Q, W, E, then max Q, then max W. So you pretty much just go through all your abilities, kind of as you would think really, leveling up each one, making sure you have them all. One thing I will mention, if you are going to invade, say you have a Blitzcrank or anything like that, you can actually level E first so you can get the stun, although I wouldn't really recommend getting E first straight away. It doesn't really matter on Gragas what you do start, but I would highly recommend either starting W or Q. If you are starting Krugs, I would highly recommend starting W, although it doesn't entirely matter because, you know, damage reduction, take less damage, all that stuff, but it doesn't really matter that much since Gragas does have quite healthy clays anyway. As for the reason why you're maxing them in this order, you used to max W and you actually still can. It doesn't entirely affect you that much, but it's not as efficient anyway, so I would highly recommend maxing the Q. That's because the slow increases, the damage increases, the cooldown is reduced, all that real good stuff. So by level 9 you'll have max Q, that means, you know, bigger slow, bigger damage, all that stuff. W as well, so by the time you are level 13, that means you are going to have a really, really high damage reduction. I believe it's 18%, which is actually quite a lot considering you are a really big tank at that point. And then E last, obviously, since the cooldown isn't reduced or anything like that, it's just the damage and it's a stun anyway. It's perfectly fine. Just it's basically like a one what's the word, like one hit wonder kind of ability. You don't only need 1 point and it's a perfectly fine ability to use. And then obviously take your ultimate whenever you can. On screen now you are seeing the runes for Gragas, and I'll later show you the masteries as well. So this is a somewhat little tweaked kind of specialised page, although you don't actually have to have it exactly like mine. You can have the 3 AP quints, although I have actually got 1 cooldown reduction quint, so you have 10% CDR at the very start of the game, just flat CDR, and then that means when you actually do pick up your Iceborne Gauntlet and then Spirit Visage, that is a total of 40% CDR. But if you can't afford the cooldown quints and cooldown glyphs and everything like that, you can literally just run the standard page where you have the AP quints, army yellows, MR glyphs or MR per level, and then you can have the armor pen, well, magic pen, armor pen, the hybrid pen ones if you want, or you can have magic pen. It doesn't really matter that much. Gragas' clays are pretty healthy anyway. It doesn't entirely matter. The reason for the attack speed is because as Gragas, in between your abilities, you do auto attack a lot. Even though you are a mage, it might seem a little bit funny to actually have attack speed on someone who's like a caster, but you do actually auto attack quite a lot with Gragas, so it is pretty useful for increasing your clay speeds. But again, as I said, it doesn't really matter that much. You can actually just run the standard AP page if you want, but this is really nice and specialised. It works really, really well, and I would highly recommend this page. On screen now are the masteries, pretty standard stuff for the junglers now. 12, 0, 18, just real standard. Strength of the Ages, Keystone, really, really, really strong in the jungle. Gives you that healthy clays and stuff like that, since you have more HP to work with. And then later on, when you have it max stacked, you can actually pull off some cheeky little things where you are healing because of the Strength of the Ages, killing a camp or a cannon minion, anything like that. Just general stuff really. The Ferocity, you're getting the increased spell damage, you are an AP caster. The Double-Edged Sword got buffed recently, so it's really, really nice to get that. You can take Exposed Weakness as well if you do want. Doesn't entirely matter that much since you are a really big tank as well, but the increased damage for yourself is actually quite nice. Natural Talent, you don't really need the Spell Vamp or the Lifesteal, but you can take it if you want. Doesn't entirely matter. And Oppressor, of course, because you do have your own CC, so that means extra damage. And then general stuff in the Resolve tree anyway, as you already know, better, healthier clays, reduced flash, cooldown, and then the Tenacity, of course, because you are a big tank. As for your jungle clay on Gragas, you can pretty much do the standard clay where you go from your camp to your buff and then to your other buff. So that'll basically be like Gromp, blue and then red, or you can do Krugs, red and then blue. Anything like that works perfectly fine with Gragas since level 3 is really, really strong for him with his body slam, so you generally do want to be trying to put out pressure as early on as you can and then transition into a really big tank for the mid and late game. But obviously remember that this is just a guideline of what you can do. Obviously your jungle route should generally change every game, although it doesn't entirely have to. It depends on your elo. You're not really going to get punished that much for it if you are silver, bronze, stuff like that. It doesn't entirely matter, but obviously remember that is a possibility, but I give you a little guideline of what you can follow. Remember as well that on Gragas you can actually take the Scuttle Crab really, really easily since you can stun it and then reduce its armor and MR, so that means you can take it really, really fast. It goes down to 10 armor and MR I believe, so you can take it really quickly. It's really easy, it gives you nice sustain and also a little bit of extra gold. As for ganking on Gragas, he's really, really strong at it, as I have mentioned before, so you can actually gank from level 3. So what you really want to do is slow the enemy. You can do pretty much one of two methods. Obviously it kind of changes a little bit when you're level 6, but say you're level 3, you can walk into the lane, throw your barrel down, and then instantly pop it for the slow, since it does still give a pretty potent slow already, and then you walk up to them, you're autoing them down, stuff like that with red buff, and then you stun them, say they flash away, you then follow them with your body slam and then stun them, then you get the kill, etc. Or what you can do is actually come into lane and you can flash body slam. So you really only want to do this against someone like, say, TF or anyone without an escape, so like, Mordekaiser, top, or something like anything weird like that, Yorick or whatever. Anyone without an escape you can actually do this on, so you know that they don't have flash and they're not going to get away. It's 100% going to be a kill, like your Fizz or something made against TF. I like using that example, it's really snowbally. So Fizz TF or like LeBlanc TF, anything like that. So you can just flash body slam into them and then they're going to die 100% during that time. When you get to level 6, it's kind of a little bit different. You kind of have the lease in options if you can kind of insect someone if you want to think of it like that, obviously without the risk. So what you can do against someone without any escapes, or if they have no flash, anything like that, you can do the previous method of flash body slamming into them, and then instantly you want to throw the cask behind them. You don't want to pressure W or anything like that, because you can actually mess it up and that will actually give them time to actually get away or anything like that, which you don't want. Obviously you do want them to actually die for the gank, stuff like that. So remember, that's one that you can do. So you can body slam into them, you can either flash body slam or just body slam, either way, and then you can obviously throw your explosive cast, your ultimate, behind them, which will knock them towards your laner. Obviously you do, as I mentioned before, you need to be careful not to misposition this, because in lane you can get flamed for it. Obviously when you're learning him it doesn't really matter, just mute them, whatever, but you need to be careful with it, because you need to, so you can actually put it just on top of them or slightly ahead of them, and then it'll knock them into tower, and then you get that lease in problem where you've just pretty much given them safety. So you need to be careful of that, but just practice and you'll get it anyway. Then of course you do have another option for ganking as Gragas, pretty much the same as really any jungler really. If your laner is, say, Lissandra or someone really strong CC, you can actually wait for them to go in, so like Leona, Lissandra, anything like that if you're bot lane, so you can wait for them to go in and then you go in, so you can guarantee your body slam, and you basically like chain CC them. So Lissandra goes in, she snares them, then she ults them, then once the ult is about to wear off you stun them, and then you knock them into your tower so they take tower hits, stuff like that. So that's just kind of a generic way that you can gank with any jungler. That isn't also only Gragas as well, you can actually apply that to any other jungler as well, but it's just something to keep in mind, since Gragas does have quite a lot of CC from level 3 with his stun, and then also with his level 6 his displacement. Moving on to the items for Gragas, the starting items anyway are the Hunter's Talisman, Refillable Potion, and your Warden Trinket. Pretty standard stuff. So you're an AP jungler, all your abilities will hit the camp, so your Q, W, E, you're not really going to ult the camps, but I guess if you really want to, but I wouldn't really recommend that one. But all your abilities do hit the camps in an AoE, so that means that you are making 100% like full effectiveness of the actual Hunter's Talisman. You can actually start Machete, although I wouldn't really recommend it. If you're not really too sure on what to do, just definitely go for the Talisman, it's a way safer option. But if you're starting blue, you can actually start on the Machete, since you already have the mana sustain anyway, but if that confuses you, just disregard that and just start the Talisman anyway, but it's just something to think of. On screen now anyway, you are seeing the two builds for Gragas. I would highly recommend the general one, although if you really do need a tank and your entire team is squishy, everyone's really squishy, then you can go for the full tank build, but I would highly recommend the general one anyway, since you are trying to carry, get some Elo, the LP, all that good stuff, so I would highly recommend the general one. So you might be wondering why you would actually go Runic Echoes on Gragas since you are a tank, but that's because your base damage is actually really quite high, so you do a lot of damage on top of the AP ratios that you do have, and then obviously the mana sustain that you do get from it, and the Luden's Echo proc, Runic Echoes proc, is actually a fair bit of damage, and then you basically get that for your early game, like sort of mid game-ish, just going into the mid game, and then by the time you have your other items, that's late game team fights, mid game team fights, and then you're actually already a real big tank anyway, so you do damage and you're a tank. It's a really nice combination, plus you have your damage reduction as well, which gives you some natural tankiness. With the full tank build, you can actually go for this if you feel like you're falling really behind, you're not really going to be useful this game, all you really want to do is peel and just kind of soak up damage, you're kind of useless, so you just want to go full tank. I'd probably recommend going for the full tank build if you are, say, like, I know you've been against a Shaco and he's been really annoying, you're 0-3 by like 6 minutes or something like that, he's really irritating, then you can just transition into the real big full meat shield, but either way I really recommend going the general build anyway, since Cinderhulk, it's not super strong, but it's not like really good either, so it's kind of a meh, I guess, but definitely I would recommend the general build. But if you do really want to be a real massive meat shield, you're like a super tank on Gragas, if you do go for the full tank with Cinderhulk, you can go for it if you want, but again, highly recommend the general build. And the item considerations for Gragas, this is just a couple of items that I actually think you can go, and I will explain whether you can or can't, and when you should, if you actually should at all. So as for Lichbane, you can actually do this as sort of when you're snowballing, so this is more when the game's pretty much over, like you're going to win, like, I don't know, you want to mess about in normals, or say you're super fed, like you've just had a really, really good game, you're like 7-0 by like 15 minutes or something like that, like you've just had a really, really good game, you can kind of snowball your lead even further, although it's really risky to do this, so make sure you're doing it in the right circumstances. So Lichbane plus the Runic Echoes is like insane damage for Gragas because of your W as well, so you apply that Sheen, the Lichbane, off your W, and you just do huge damage, but again, it's really risky, so really be careful when you do this. Locket of the Iron Solari is another item. Gragas is, again, he's a real big tank, he's really good at peeling, and then the Iron Solari gives him some CDR, gives him the shield as well, and also it's a real nice AoE aura for your team. You can actually go this item, I would only really recommend this when your support doesn't get it, and you 100% need it, like, usually the support's going to get it anyway, but you can get it as a jungler, you can get it as your second item after Runic Echoes, especially if you are behind as well. It's really nice, it's a low economy item, it's really cheap, it gives you real nice stats, and it's overall really, really useful. Although it's more kind of game specific, I wouldn't get it every single game, obviously if they're full AD don't get this item, but it is kind of game specific, but it is a consideration that you can think of in your games. And the last consideration is the Zrot Portal. So this gives you both armor and MR. You do get the little Voidlings, and since you are a real big tank as Gragas, you do have a lot of HP. This means that your Voidlings are actually going to do quite a lot of damage, since they do scale with your max HP, and the amount of damage you do also scales with your max HP, and since you're a big tank, that means they're going to do a lot of damage. Although this is more a game specific item. This is, for late game, I'd probably only really pick it up as a last item, so it's your very last final item. When you're rotating around the map as a team, you need to create pressure, get objectives, stuff like that. It's more of the late game decision stuff, but I wouldn't really recommend getting this every game. If you do want to get an item for like the armor and MR, I would recommend GA, but otherwise, if you're not really sure, just pick up another defensive item anyway. It's kind of game specific, but it's also something that you can consider. Really just think, do you need those, out pressure your opponent, stuff like that. As for Gragas' combos, he doesn't really have any combos. Well, obviously he does have combos, but they're not like a Lee Sin kind of level. They're really, really simple. All you really need to do to be effective on Gragas is to obviously land your body slam and then perfect. He's sort of like Vi, he's really, really simple. All you need to really do is perfect your flash body slam, which is just press E and then you flash onto someone, so where you want your body slam to land, that's where you flash to. So that's really all you need to perfect. Your general combo anyway is your E, W, and then Q, or E, QW. Either way, it doesn't really matter too much. Obviously there's slight pros and cons to doing which way, depending on how you're actually channeling your W, since it does stop you. Although a real nice little tip that you can remember is to W before you go into lane. So say you're walking into lane, you press W and then you E, and then it basically activates your auto attack straight away, so you don't really miss any time. Just a little tip to remember. But as for his combos, there isn't really anything. Just remember to practice on your flash body slam, and then you're pretty much really set with Gragas pretty much. And now we're on the final section of the guide, where I talk about any just general little things with Gragas, playstyle, general other comments that I actually feel are necessary for the guide. So remember, with Gragas, you are a really, really huge tank. You actually do a deceptively high amount of damage when you are going the Runic Echoes, Iceborne Gauntlet, like full tank kind of build. You actually peel really, really well, and your ult is actually a displacement. It's a huge displacement. If you can land a really, really nice ulti, this is one thing that separates really good Gragas players from just decent Gragas players. If you can land your ult in a real nice position in between the people, so say you're knocking their like Maokai comes forward, and then you stop everyone else from getting there, and you can just instantly burst down like the Maokai. I know it might seem really weird to burst down a Maokai, but if 5 people are on him, say like you're already carry and everyone else is hitting him, even though he's a tank, he's going to die. Like, then the fight's a 4v5, you can push an objective, anything like that. Or you can do really sneaky engages where you can knock like the mid laner into your team, like the mid laner and AD carry, if they're stood together backline, you can actually knock them into your team, stuff like that. Thing with Gragas as well is flanking as well. Flanking with Gragas is really, really huge, considering your ulti as a displacement. So for example, you're all, there's like a standoff going down mid lane, you can jump over the raptor wall, for example, or like just any general wall. You can actually come over that with your body slam, or you can flash over it, anything like that, and then you can actually knock the mid laner and AD carry or any priority target into your team, sort of like a makeshift Lee Sin insec, if you want to call it that. But that's a really, really big thing, and it'll also win you a lot of games. I've played quite a few games where I've seen this, and I've I've just like it kind of occurs to you as you see it. It's like, oh, I can actually get over this wall and knock them into that's going to win the fight. So something to think of there. That's really, really nice to do, and it will pretty much win your games as well, since late game, 50-second death timers and then mid and AD carries dead, you've pretty much won the team fight 3v5. Remember as well that Gragas is pretty strong early game. Actually, I think people underestimate Gragas' early game. It's actually reasonably strong. If you do get a lead on Gragas, you do actually snowball pretty hard considering you're a tank. It's not like it's not really like Nidalee or Kha'Zix's kind of like Rengar kind of snowball, but it's kind of a safe snowball, since you snowball and then transition into a tank, so you don't exactly lose your lead since you have damage and then you put it into tank items. It's kind of weird, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So like you don't really lose your lead on Gragas if you do get ahead, unless you do really stupid stuff, obviously, like you like flash body slam into Baron Pit 1v5 when they try and do it, something like that. As long as you don't do really stupid things, then you're gonna keep your lead and you're always going to be really strong on Gragas. Another thing as well is to counter jungle on Gragas. This is kind of generally for all junglers, but I mean the kind of safer junglers like Gragas, Rek'Sai, Vi, stuff like that. People who have the escapes, you can actually counter jungle really, really easily. So you take the camp, and then if anything happens, you just body slam basically out of the camp. So you go over the Raptor wall, or over the Wolf wall, or Blue wall, anything like that. So remember to actually counter jungle frequently, since you are pretty safe when you are doing it as well. I think that's pretty much it for this guide anyway, guys. Hope this did actually help some people. I imagine at least one person's helped by this guide anyway. Hope it gave you a pretty much reasonable understanding at best with Gragas. Pretty simple champion, would highly recommend it for your AP jungler, since pretty much everyone does really need an AP jungler. I know Gragas and Elise are mine, although I've kind of shifted more into Gragas since he's way easier to play than Elise, and he's not really, you can't really mess up on Gragas unless you do some really god-awful ulti, but once you do get him down, he's really, really simple to play anyway, and he actually does work really effectively. And also, I do believe I'm probably going to start calling this phase, well, this section of the guide, the ramble phase, because I know I do ramble like just loads in this phase. I guess if you want to listen to just my thoughts on the champion stuff like that, it's pretty cool. But anyway, I'm going to stop rambling and pretty much wrap up this guide. So I hope this guide did help someone. If it did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. Do you want to see more? I will see you guys in the next video.